So today we are privileged to have with us two eminent architects who will be sharing their insights and experiences with us. First, we have architect Madhavi Desai. Madhavi Desai is an architect, researcher, writer, and a teacher. She was an adjunct faculty at CEPT University, Ahmedabad since 1986 to 2018. She has had research fellowships from ICSSR and SARAI Delhi and the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture MIT and the Getty Foundation USA. She is a co-founder of Women Architects Forum and more recently the Feminist Collective in Architecture. She has authored and co-authored many books. To list a few: Architecture and Independence, The Search for Identity, India 1880 to 1980, Architectural Heritage of Gujarat, Interpretation, Appreciation, Values, The Bungalow in 20th Century India, and many more. She is also the editor of Gender and Built Environment in India and Gender and the Indian City. I request Madhavi ma'am to please start with her session.
When I was invited by the road team, they asked me to select my own topic. And I decided that at this age, it is time to kind of review my career as a woman in architecture in India and also make a kind of an honest presentation, talk about my struggles and the problems I have faced. Because I think in most presentations, you see the rosy picture on the front and you don't really learn about what happens. So for me, it's also a first. But even putting the presentation together gave me a lot of insights and I learned about myself. So thank you very much, Team Road, for giving me this opportunity. So I was born in a kind of upper middle class family in Ahmedabad. My father was a medical doctor and my mother a homemaker. And when I was growing up, I had no experience, or I thought I had no experience of any gender discrimination. I have two twin younger brothers. And I did not want to go into, we had three choices in the late 60s: science, arts, or commerce. And even though I had the grades after SSC, I didn't want to go into medicine because, I had seen my father. And most of my classmates, girls, would do a BA and get married. And that was not my option. And I found commerce very dry. But I had seen some cardboard models at one of the SEPT students' places. So I thought, okay, I will try architecture. And I even told in the interview that I'm not very sure whether I will continue or not. So, in a sense, what I say here is that I joined architecture by default. But in the first 2 weeks, like I think many of you, I really fell in love with architecture and I started looking at the world in a different manner. But once again, as you can see in the first picture here, there was no awareness of gender discrimination. We all mixed. It was a liberal school, etc. So after, Mickey, my husband, and myself, we were in the same class and we fell in love. We went to do our master's in the US. Then we worked in California for 2 years. We came back after 5 years and we set up a joint practice. And then I became a mother of two young daughters. And that is when the horrible reality struck. I suddenly realized that, it was very difficult for me to take equal part in the practice because the young girls were biologically dependent on me and I was also a responsible parent. So I could not make it to the early morning site meetings, late meetings, whatever. I didn't have enough confidence of, giving instructions on site, which also kept me back. The construction workers, all male, the consultants were all male engineers, etc. And they looked at me, which really I struggled with my confidence, etc. Only after I started reading feminist theory and I read about women's, I mean, I didn't do this immediately. This was a gradual process. And this is like the key to my life is that the personal became political, as the cliche goes. And, it has been a struggle to do what I'm doing, but, it has been an excellent learning experience. When I did my book, which is there in the poster, Women Architects in India, I interviewed many women, and most of them refused to call it themselves, of course, woman architect or a feminist, and most of them had no idea about the women's movement in India. And they all, of course, as you all probably know, that feminism is not very kindly looked at, because there is a whole belief that it is generated in the West and it is against men and it is against marriage, and feminism will kill families. But most people don't know that we've had our own women's movement, which is not as graphical as the West, which is not as homogeneous. It is kind of fragmented. But I call Raja Ram Mohan Roy the first feminist. Anyway, so here you can see that in the first photograph, this is probably the early 20th century, and where women and men were photographed separately. And here we have, what was very common, a kind of an extended family. British education affected the thinking of Indian men, and they wanted change in the women in some way, or education, etc. So I think that the origins of the women's movement was in colonialism, and it grew simultaneously with other societal changes. The other turning point came when the freedom struggle was going on, and in the 30s and the 40s, because of Gandhi and his mass movement, women, as you can see here, came out of the kitchens and their protected lives at home. They took part in the public space and lot of activities as listed here. At that time, matrimony was really highly, was considered very high. If you were not married, you were not defined. So in those kinds of situation, a big change happened. And I think if you can see, I'm sorry. It is working. So here you can see, if you contrast the earlier slide with how women were dressed and had all kinds of ornamentation, a big change had happened. Many women in the freedom struggle had sold their jewelry. They dressed very simply. They spun their own khadi and wore their own saris. So it not only participated, but they were productive in the freedom struggle. And then I think it created, at least higher education became a part of our society. This is my mother. She graduated, I think, in 1947. And as we became, as time passed after independence, women slowly started first doing the traditional works like teaching and stitching, etc., cooking, and then gradually they joined professions. And even in architecture, women started joining in the 30s, but more in the 40s and 50s. Before I start my story, I wanted to just give you glimpses of this, because I think today's generation need to know what has gone on before, you know. And unfortunately, I know in schools of architecture or in high schools, we get no idea. Nobody teaches us about the women's movement or how change has happened. I think it is as important as the other histories. So, no, 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 I'm fine. So, coming to, what I have done, so I have just listed here. One is research, writing, and publication. So we had Mickey and I had a practice for about first 20 years or so, but for various reasons it did not work out. And I think with whatever destiny we had, we moved into research, documentation, writing, publication, and academics. So one important thing is the making of books. The second is teaching and doing workshops. And these are the courses that I have listed here. Only when I prepared the presentation, I realized that all the courses were kind of developed by me, thought of by me. And then I worked a little in the empowerment of women, and I've done some other activities. So I will be sharing these with you today. Research, writing, and publication. Between Mickey and myself, we've done 10 books. We've either co-authored, or edited. And all I want to say is that it's not easy to do books because in in our profession, in our fraternity, there is no funding inside the fraternity or outside. So most of the work is because of our passion of creating knowledge in the Indian context. And also we get, kind of little royalty, etc. One other reason is that, especially in India, design and designers are really, esteemed, valued. Research or scholarship is kind of, if you can't design, you do that kind of attitude is there. Even the very good schools of architecture here, they kind of have a little dissertation course or, whatever. But they don't really pay special attention. We don't get any sabbatical like in the West, etc. So all I'm trying to say is that what I'm presenting is not been easy. So though this book was published in 2007, it is my very old work. It is based on the thesis that I did at CEPT, at the School of Architecture in 1974. And it took a long time for it to be published. How I came about this topic is, when at that time when you reached we had a compulsory research thesis at CEPT. And when we reached the final year at the thesis level, we had no idea what is a thesis. So it took about 6 months to figure out what it is and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do. Took me a long time to find the topic. Somebody said the Bohras have an interesting housing, and then I saw, and then I selected it. So the whole thesis, which supposed to take 6 months, took me a whole year. And if I look at it now, I'm so embarrassed. The content was good, but I didn't know how to put it together. But based on that, I got the ICSSR fellowship, and then I prepared the report. I sent it to the Aga Khan Foundation, and I went to MIT to turn it into a manuscript, and then it took again few years for it to be published. This is the whole. The book is coming out as a reprint. In fact, maybe today or tomorrow, the first copy will be out. So, for me, it is the real, very close to my heart, because this was the my first real connection with research. So I don't have a lot of time to go along, but The Bohras are an Islamic community. They are said to be, they were Hindus. They say they were Nagas, but I haven't found any proof. They were converted in 11th century, and in those days, those important towns like Sitpur, Surat, Kapadwans, they have their traditional housing. And I mean, in those days, the Council of Architecture published the book and they made all the schools buy it. But I've had students who come and tell me that, they found it very useful. So I'm very proud of that. So here you can see their sense of, sorry. Yeah, no. So here you can see their sense of aesthetics and all the ornamentation, etc. Their language itself is Gujarati. They wear kind of modified Gujarati clothes, and because in the Islamic community the women are protected from outside gaze as much as possible. We find that there are some of the objects have kind of where women can sit inside and look outside. And what they did was they took the regional pole house typology of Gujarat and they modified it. And not only modified it, but they took it to an extreme in terms of ornamentation, in terms of ventilation, etc. Now, this was a very important work that three of us did. 100 years, it was not easy at all. Professor John Lang, who was teaching at UPenn at that time, came to India and he saw one of Mickey's articles, which he did for the Gazetteer of Gujarat. And so he invited us both to co-author with him. It was, at that time, what was happening was that this was kind of a missing piece. So there were foreign publishers, foreign authors who had done work on colonial architecture of India on one end, and on the other hand, there were books on Charles Correa, and there were books on Doshi, and all the famous male architects. But in between, there was nothing. So we were very happy to be working on this. John Lang was the lead author, and without him, this would not have been possible. He really took the lead. He had Australian grants and he could travel. Mickey also traveled a little bit. And as I have said here, we tried to put a lot of things together. It took about 6 to 7 years. So, we looked at the colonial architecture. We not only looked at the very famous buildings, but we tried to dig out sort of important everyday kind of buildings. And we worked very hard to get the dates, to try to find out who were the contractors. We tried to find, our book talks about patrons, clients, it talks about architectural education, it talks about the changes which happened in the profession, and it talks about the stylistic changes. So, here we have Portuguese influence. This is what we called it Indo-Deco, Art Deco, but Indianized Deco. And these are, of course, Deco buildings. We also looked at modern architecture, but the last chapter also tried to go beyond 1980 and housing, apartment block, etc., as a kind of an epilogue. The book was very successful in the West. I think it's not being used as much as possible in our colleges of architecture. But again, its second edition has come 2 years ago. This was my edited book. Uh, it is based on, we had Ismat Khambata and myself did a symposium called Gender and the Built Environment in Ahmedabad in 2002. We did not have any support, any institutional support. We just, because of our own passion, we put it together. And we had presentations from India, of course, but one paper from Sri Lanka, one paper from Bhutan. And this book has 11 chapters. It also has a reprint. I'm proud of the reprints because that means some value is there. And basically, it looks at how men and women use space differently. And it's very difficult to see this because it is not as graphic as domestic violence or other violent discrimination. So the spatial discrimination is very subtle and almost invisible. So some of the chapters, we have 11 chapters. Some of the chapters, for example, this is a women's ghat in Mirzapur. It's a rare kind of a ghat where only women are allowed. And I personally think that maybe you cannot see it in this photograph, but there is a whole what you call feminine kind of expression. One chapter talks about women construction workers, where they live, how they live. I know things have improved in the last probably a decade or so, but these are the issues which need much more attention. This is looking at pleasure spaces for women, and this is Hiranti Vallandave from Sri Lanka. Her plan, where she designed, this is a Muslim house where she actually responded to men and women, etc. Here you can see. So these are some of the chapters. This is another chapter where women in public spaces, women in Mumbai trains. This is by Shilpa Phadke. What they experience, and if we understand, if we have research collected, then we can move towards design. How design can be improved with this knowledge. So this is kind of empowering women and talking with them. And that last is my personal article on the bungalow and how its form changed with the role of the woman changing. This book, again, three of us came together. It is sort of a blend of our interests, Mickey's and my interest in colonial architecture, as well as domestic architecture. I think the domestic genre is, again, neglected in scholarship. And though we design, there is housing design, house design, it is not so much focus, there is not much focus. So both of us kind of grew up in a bungalow, and we wanted to do a book. We looked at the origin of the bungalow. The name bungalow, it is said that it comes from Bengal, and the traditional vernacular house of the Bengal, which had a kind of a sloping roof on all four sides, and the veranda was there. So here we have one of the early bungalows, and also, if I'm sure you all know that there were many variations of the bungalows, like the dark bungalow and the PWD work, etc. We also looked at, the first chapter of the book looks at the traditional housing, in all parts of India. So like in Gujarat, we have the pole houses, and in the north, we have the mohallas and other housing types. And then we come to the, why this particular typology became so popular. And the British, of course, developed it uh, in Bengal because they were settled there near Calcutta first. But our book focuses more on how it developed in the rest of India. So here we have the monkey top bungalows of Bangalore. We also have garden houses in Chennai and, in all kinds of variations. And there were stylistic changes that happened. So here is a very interesting bungalow in Calcutta on the river Hubli. So this lawn leads to the river, and I don't have time or space to show you the interiors, but they have Art Deco interiors, very beautiful. And we also, of course, studied plans and elevations, and from the early symmetrical bungalows, it slowly became, as symmetrical as stylistic changes took place. We also briefly looked at how it changed the settlement pattern. So the bungalow was kind of an object in space. So there was a whole compound, and then the bungalow was in the center. The British found it rather safe because they didn't want, the natives to come rushing in. And then our middle classes picked up the typology. This is a kind of a subdivision in Khar. And you can see how the bungalows were laid out. That is a bungalow in Mumbai. And then, as time passed, in the 60s and the 70s, the urban land became very expensive. So the housing, apartment housing, etc., took over. But the bungalow came back in the 2000s. So this is a design by Anjali Yagnik in Bangalore, suburb of Bangalore, and this is another kind of gated housing in Ahmedabad. It sort of came back in a new form. This is a book. This is the only book where we were commissioned to do a book. So this is by the government information department of Gujarat. We've never, I think this is the first and the last time we've worked with the government. But even they wanted a kind of a, heritage of Gujarat, mostly to give away the book to their guests. And they would have been happy with a coffee table book, but we've never done a coffee table book. So we kind of compromised. This is a book which is in between academic book and coffee table book. And though we are co-authors, it's about, mostly Mickey's book. He went out every weekend or every other weekend for 3 days to, go around Gujarat and to locate different buildings. So here we have the famous ones and not so famous ones. So this is the Ranki Vav in Patan and the Juma Masjid in Ahmedabad. This is Kutch. Is this Kutch, Mickey? Yeah. And then, of course, we did studies of how the housing typology changed, and these are, poles. Basically, we had the book in 4 chapters. So there was sort of traditional architecture, then what we call classical Islamic and Hindu, and then we had colonial, and then we had the contemporary or modern. So this is, had the upper there is the colonial, and then we have the contemporary. And we discovered really, even in contemporary, this is a house by Nari Gandhi in Surat, and this is Kamal Mangaldas's work in Ahmedabad. This is the Morbi street in Morbi. So we learned a lot, and we of course, we had problem with the government. The lower we got the job through the main guy, but then the lower people wanted bribes and etc., which we don't pay. So we had a problem. But that is, the book is now out of print. This is my book, which is very close to my heart. I am aware that it has its limitations, but I think I have been able to start a conversation, and it has been well received in the international circles, because it is probably the first book, if not in Asia, at least in South Asia. And it took me, again, there was no funding. It took me more than 10 years to do. I have 7 what I call first generation architects and 28 contemporary architects. And I went and interviewed all 28 of them. I could not visit their buildings because I had, no funding to do that. But as I believe, as I told you, the personal is political. I believe that we cannot just look at the professional selves. So through the interviews, I tried to put their personal lives and the professional lives together. I'm very happy that this book got done. So this is some of the first generation of women. I don't know how many of you have heard of them. When I used to teach, I used to ask the students, can you name 5 women architects? And the international one they could name was Zaha Hadid, of course. And in national, they could name a few, but not much of the older generation. So we have these, Perrin Mistry was probably the first woman. She joined architecture in Mumbai in 1936. This is a design by Gira Sarabhai, who she did with Fuller, yeah. Tu શું કહે છે Mickey? It takes it, I have to press it. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not very good at this. But, and then the one here is one of the first sketches from Pravina Mehta's office. It is the proposal of New Bombay, which she did with Shirish Patel and Charles Correa. And of course, Pravina Mehta's name is now nowhere, And also, I must say that it was very difficult to find material on most of these women, because they themselves did not know how valuable their work was. There are no archives. I think Hema's work has just been given to the CEPT archives. But, and Gira Sarabhai, I tried to interview her a couple of times, and she said, I've not designed anything. Why do you want to interview me? So, it was very difficult, but I put whatever I could together. This is a project by Yuli Chaudhary on her own. After Corbusier passed away, she was working in Chandigarh. And I think it's very important to know who these people were, because women architects need mentors or role models of, they want to be, I think today's generation needs to know that these were the women who kind of really rebelled against their society, because they again came out of what their typical role was expected to be. So you have to know whose shoulders you are standing on. And then I have 28 contemporary practices. Of course, I could only interview the successful, most of them are successful women architects. And this is some of their work. This is Brinda Somaya's. This is Anupama Kundu's famous house, and this is Revati Kamat's. So the the previous ones I call first generation. This includes first and probably second and third generation. I am aware that I have not covered small towns and whatever many other women who need to be covered, but within my limitations, at least I could begin to start something. Next, please. So this is my last book. If you are in India, and you can't just miss the urbanization that is going on. And when I found that there was no talk in most of the urban institutions or government about 50% of the population, how the city can become friendly and safe for women. And for the government, safety is, CCTV cameras. And I think CCTV cameras are used afterwards to catch the culprit. I don't know if they can really stop the crime. So, and it's also talks about women as equal citizens, not just their safety. So we have about 12 chapters in there, and some of the chapters are good, some of them are okay. But again, this book, I hope, would start a conversation, and more work can be done so that it will reach the policymakers, it will reach designs, definite change to improve. Next, please. So these are from some of the essays: women in public spaces, women, Mahila parks in Delhi. Some of them are remaining from the Mughal times, and we might say, "Oh no, we should not have separate parks." But here you can see women come here, they themselves play, they sit. Their children might be playing, and they chit chat, etc. So till there is complete equality, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing like this. The she taxis are, give a lot of safe travels. I don't know how many places have, but that is one article talks about it. This is also involving women stakeholders themselves in decision making. Next, please. Some other chapters. This is on that side is the work by Pratima Joshi of Pune. You might be knowing her. When she gets the slum dwellers themselves involved in surveying and other things, and she's done a lot of work. Here I'm talking about the male gaze and how it makes women uncomfortable. They have a lot of time. This is around a tea shop in Lucknow, and they just hang out there and look at you. And again, a contrast, and that is actually a view of a resettlement. When the famous riverfront was developed in Ahmedabad, the river dwellers, the slum dwellers on the riverbed, were promised housing 6 to 7 kilometers away. In reality, they are given 12 to 13 kilometers away, sort of four-story high rises. This is, I don't know how much you can see, but this is a chapter in which the author talks about, the level of safety, what kind of lighting is there. So in, safety, there are so many issues, lighting, maintenance, eyes on the street, what Jane Jacobs talked about. There are, what kind of landscapes are there, what kind of mobility, transportation, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Next, please. So teaching at the Faculty of Architecture, how much time have I spent? So 20 more? Please tell me. Okay, so why did I start teaching? As I said, I was struggling. Being a mother, I was struggling. And I had all these ideas about, teaching, but I did not have any confidence. So the first course I taught was with Mickey. I took his help. Uh, so that is really the truth. But also, I would like to share that while I was teaching at CEPT, I taught for about 30 years, and I constantly felt marginalized and kind of invisible because I don't know, because I was a woman. What I was not given any studio, uh, and I taught some theory courses, and I at the end I was teaching electives, and it hurt sometimes. But then I said, forget about it. I love teaching. I love my students, and as I told you, I developed my courses. So that was the reason. Next, please. So this was the first course I taught with Mickey Desai. We came out with this idea of regional architecture of Gujarat. It is kind of based, we didn't know at that time, but it's based on Cho Padamsee's concept that we should teach local, regional, and national history at the undergraduate level. And I agree with that because I think, I don't know how many of you, but that Fletcher and Percy Brown and continuous teaching of that. I don't know if things have improved now. But so we tried to, there was no material, so we tried to develop this. There is always, in our work, there is a close connection of the research, publication, and teaching. So, I don't need to explain that, but it is all kind of, it feeds on each other. So, next, please. So we had the students, go out and measure and sketch and then prepare assignments. They also did details. They wrote a little bit. They would read a little bit. So all the courses had, I think, a kind of a seminar type approach. Next, please. Now, this is the course that I think I taught for 15 years or so till I got sick of teaching. So when I came back from the US and when I wanted to teach, I realized that the research thesis was as compulsory as ever, and what I had experienced, the 6 months of confusion and all, was still there. So I thought, okay, let me see what I can do. And I must say that in the first 50 years, though we were paid peanuts at CEPT, we were given freedom. So I kind of designed the course and I introduced it. And again, it was not easy. There was no material about, it was about teaching in the Indian context, in architecture. So I think I would like to say that I worked hard, and I would like to say all of you, don't take anything for granted. You have to work hard. So I would read anything I could find on architectural and then try to apply it to the Indian situation, to the undergraduate learning, because these students had 4.5 years or 4 years of intense design studio, because design studio was the star course in all colleges of architecture. So then this needed new skills of analytical reading, analytical writing. So these are all these assignments were prepared based on articles. You read an article and do a visual and textual summary. So, and then of course we had a final paper. We had group discussions, individual presentations. And my ex-students, please correct me if I'm saying something wrong. But so I taught it for 15 years till I got very tired of it. So then next please. So I started teaching first year. And again, one had to find one's own method, because these were the students who had come from 12th. All the mugging and, all the pressures of 12th science, they had to de-learn. And so here, I'm sharing, like the assignment in the center was modified from Claire Cooper-Marcus' self-environment biography. How to make them learn or think about culture, their own environment, etc. And the other three are, an assignment which said that turn your house into a home. And, it got them thinking about, how this is the most intimate thing that they know. And so then we would put this thing together, the culture, society, which, um, how the spaces are used, etc. Next, please. At times, I also ask them to take up the pattern language book and to kind of select a pattern and then apply it to their own environment. And this was from humanities too. But, this way they got to learn about the book, which is, I think, extremely important for undergraduate education. Next, please. And then I started, these are the two kind of elective courses. So when I'm doing my book, I realize things and I want to share that with the students. So I propose these courses. One is gender and architecture, the other was gender and the city. And there is always learning back and forth. And again, I used what we did in first year. I asked the students to not just do their plans, but to do gender analysis of how their own houses are used by, father, grandfather, etc., etc. And it always pleased me that the students were like, they had taken these things for granted. But when they did the analysis, they said, oh my God, yes, my grandfather is always sitting in the hall. He's like right in front of the TV. Next, please. And so some of the other assignments that they did, they looked at the textile workshop, they looked at garden spaces from the gendered viewpoint. Again, some people looked at construction workers and their housing. Next, please. Alternatively, I would do a course, Gender in the Indian City. I think I was probably working on the book or the book came afterwards, I don't know. But that the one on top is an assignment where I made them follow a migrant, a woman, and some people followed women, some people followed men, and to see how much a migrant, what are the problems they have, how much can they really interact with the city, and here is how change in a bus stand, how design really impacts the behavior of men and women. This is a study of a mall. This is a study of a flower market. Next, please. And then towards the end, I wanted to, these are all these are electives, so 2 hours a week, so not much can be done. But, I wanted to introduce the element of design. So not just documenting things. So this was, our city, Ahmedabad was very proud of what they did here, was a Mahila police station, the first Mahila police station. But can you imagine, they've done a kind of a triangular plan of the police station. So this was a group and I had them add, what kind of changes they can do to make this really Mahila friendly. Next, please. This was just once I did this workshop, appreciating architecture for non-architects. And I only done it once, but I would really like to explore, how non-architects can appreciate architecture. Next, please. This was, again, very close to my heart. This was a summer workshop I did with Mickey when our children were young. So when the children were young, as a mother, they had these 2 months of summer vacation. And I would leave them at home. What would they do the whole day? They would do nothing, Dhamal. And I thought, let's think of something. So we did this for about 5 years, I think. Summer workshops where we would take them, in the center of the week, we would take them to a monument or an architectural place. And then throughout the week, from morning 8 to 11, they would do other activities. based on that visit, or sometimes they would have storytellers, we would have puppet makers, something or the other. But because we only knew architecture, we did architectural workshops or heritage workshops. This was a group depiction of the city of Ahmedabad. Not very well, but that is the river, etc. This was a visit to Adalazni Vav. Next, please. This was, we made them walk across the Ellis Bridge and they went to the old Sunday market. And you see, the parents, nowadays, the parents don't have time to, make them walk, or they take them to the club or to the whatever, the jumping areas or whatever. So, I think the children also really appreciated. Next slide, you can see their work. This is the Jummah Masjid with a little help from the instructors, shelter ideas, making a village. Yeah, next, please. Now, this is the Women Architects Forum that a few of us started in 91, and it hardly lasted 5 years. I had noticed, as I said, my own awareness and sensitivity about gender was increasing over the years. And I had noticed that in the 80s, in all the big conferences, the main speakers were male. The women were asked to give flowers or sing bhajans. And that was all. So a few of us came together, in which at that time we had Brinda Somaya, Neera Adarkar, Shimul Javeri, all the famous Mumbai architects. And this is the only two photographs I have. We did not realize in a small way we were creating history. So here is Ismat Khambata with Gira Sarabhai. A group of us had gone to visit Gira Sarabhai and talk to us. We had a little conference, some small exhibition. And then we did, a few events, but it kind of petered down. We were told that maybe we were ahead of our time. Next, please. So, in the 21st century, Mickey, myself, and a few others, we've set up this Feminist Collective in architecture. And we've had two very successful symposiums. That one was called Women in Architectural Practice, Everyday Experiences, and Agency or something. And this was Gender in Academics, second conference. We are, again, I think a group like Road. We have no institutional connection because we want to protect our freedom, but we have no money. We have always struggling for money and participation from people because, as I said, these are invisible, subtle issues which are, I think, very important, but, people don't get it. So, but, it's good when we come together, it's a good event. Next, please. So these are some of our activities, what we try: city walks, readings, talks, etc., etc. Next, please. So I also got a chance early this year to do the history of feminine efforts in Indian architecture at the Art, Architecture and Design Biennale in Red Fort. So you can see the kind of the timeline. Next, please. And this is the last effort we are making. This in February 22nd and 23rd in Ahmedabad, we are putting this forum together. It's called Built Environment, Design and Gender. And I would like to invite all of you, or even send us support in terms of funding or sponsorship, or at least come and participate. And yeah, please come. Next, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madhavi ma'am. It was a very inspiring session, I would say, not only for women in architecture, but I can see a lot of men here. And I'm sure it's a very thought provoking session it was. So thank you very much for that. Yes, we want all the men to think, and I'm sure they are provoked to think today. Thank you so much for that.